I stood in the backyard, the acrid smell of smoke choking me. My paintings, memories of my husband, 40 years of my life, were burning in a bonfire, and Lisa was laughing. Dear viewers, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Rain drummed against the windows of my Victorian home on Maple Street. I, Eleanor Grace, at 68 years old, stood by the living room window, watching droplets slide down the glass like tears. I had lived in this house for 43 years, first with my late husband, Richard, then alone. Every corner held memories. Every wall bore witness to our love, our joys, and our sorrows. But now, the house was filled with new voices. My son, Jake, and his wife, Lisa, had temporarily moved in with me while their own home was being repaired after a fire. "It's just for a little while, Mom," Jake had said a month ago, hugging me in the hallway. "Lisa's really grateful." I remember Lisa standing beside him, her blonde hair neatly styled, her smile flawless, but her eyes scanned my home with a cold, calculating glint, like a real estate appraiser. "Of course, Mama Eleanor," she said in a honeyed voice that somehow made me shiver. "We'll try not to be any trouble." The first few days were calm. Jake helped me in the garden, and we chatted about work, the weather, the small stuff of life. But Lisa started making changes almost immediately. "Mama Eleanor, don't you think this sofa is in the wrong place?" she asked on the third day, pointing to the antique sofa Richard and I had bought during our honeymoon in Paris. "It's blocking the energy flow in the room. I've studied feng shui." I tried to explain the sofa's history, but she was already dragging it to the opposite wall. "Trust me, I know a thing or two about interior design." By the end of the week, my living room was unrecognizable. Lisa had rearranged all the furniture, rolled up and stored my Persian rugs. They're too dark, they make the space feel smaller, and replaced my lamps with sleek, modern fixtures of glass and steel. "See how much more spacious it feels?" and she exclaimed, throwing her arms wide. "This house has so much potential. It just needs to be cleared of all the clutter." Clutter. She called the things I'd collected over decades clutter. Each item tied to a memory, a moment of my life. The antique clock from my grandmother, the porcelain figurines from our travels, Richard's books, his favorite editions of Dickens and Twain. "Lisa, dear," I tried to stop her one day as she packed the books into a box. "These books mean a lot to me. Richard used to read them aloud in the evenings." "Mama Eleanor." She turned to me with a patient smile, the kind adults give to petulant children. "I understand sentimental value, but let's be honest. When was the last time you read them? They're just gathering dust. And this house is running out of space for the living. The living. As if I, living here alone, were a ghost. But worst of all was how she looked at my paintings. My collection was my pride, my passion, the meaning of my life after Richard's death. For 40 years I had gathered these canvases, works by local artists I'd discovered before they were known, a few pieces by impressionists bought in small European galleries, rare sketches and studies by masters. In the living room hung my favorites, a Thomas Cole landscape of the Hudson River, an abstract composition by Georgia O'Keeffe, purchased before her global fame, and the crown jewel of my collection, a preparatory sketch for Claude Monet's Water Lilies, acquired at a Paris auction 20 years ago. In the basement I kept the rest, over 100 paintings stored in climate-controlled conditions. I had a catalog for every work, provenance documents, insurance appraisals. Richard initially thought it was just a hobby, but over time he understood. It was more than that. It was a legacy, a history of art told through canvas and paint. Lisa would pause in front of each painting in the living room, her face barely concealing disgust. "Mama Eleanor, have you ever thought about updating the wall decor?" she'd ask, tilting her head and squinting at the coal landscape. "These old paintings, they're so gloomy, and the frames totally clash with the new style." "These are valuable works, Lisa," I'd reply, trying to keep my patience. "That coal landscape is worth more than a new car." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive laugh. "Mama Eleanor, with all due respect, who decides that value? Some art critic in a museum? If a painting doesn't bring joy to the home, why keep it here? Doesn't bring joy." Every morning I'd come downstairs to greet my paintings. They welcomed me like old friends, each telling its own story. In the dark days after Richard's death, they were what kept me from losing my mind to loneliness. But Lisa didn't understand. To her, they were just decor that didn't fit her vision of a modern home. Worse still, Jake backed her up. My own son, whom I'd raised, taught to love art and beauty, now nodded when his wife talked about the need for change. "Mom, Lisa's right," he said one evening over tea in the kitchen. "The house does feel a bit cluttered. Maybe you could put some things in storage, or sell them. You can't enjoy all the paintings at once. Sell them." He was suggesting I sell my collection as if it were old furniture at a garage sale. "Jake," I placed my hand on his, "these paintings aren't just things. They're our family's history. Your father helped me choose many of them. One day, they'll be yours." "Yeah, Mom, I get it," he said, awkwardly pulling his hand away. "But Lisa and I aren't really into art. We need more practical things. Maybe it'd be better to sell them and put the money into a college fund for our future kids." Future kids. They didn't even have children yet, and they were already planning to spend the money from my legacy. I noticed Lisa going to the basement more often, at first under the pretense of doing laundry, then to check for dampness, and later to see what could be rearranged for better use of space. She'd come back with gleaming eyes telling Jake, "There's a fortune just gathering dust down there. Imagine how much space we could free up." I started to feel uneasy. It was like watching a cat study a birdcage, calculating how to get to its prey. One morning, I went to the basement and found several paintings out of place. The protective wrap on one was slightly crumpled. "Lisa," I called as she came down with a laundry basket, "have you been touching my paintings?" "What? Oh, sorry, I might have bumped one while passing by. No big deal, right?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes darted nervously. "Lisa, please be careful. These works are fragile and valuable." "Of course, Mama Eleanor. I'll be more careful." But I could tell from her tone that she was lying, and that scared me more than anything. Weeks passed, and the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. Lisa continued her improvements, and I felt my home slipping out of my control. She talked about the house's potential if we used the space properly. She brought in interior design magazines showing me photos of modern minimalist rooms. "Look, Mama Eleanor, how clean and spacious. No clutter, no unnecessary details, just functionality and beauty." Her idea of beauty was the opposite of mine. For her, beauty was in emptiness, in the absence of history. For me, beauty was in the layers of time, in the way the past and present wove together in a home filled with love and memories. "Jake," I tried talking to him alone, "I think Lisa's going too far. This is still my house." "Mom, she's just trying to help. She has good taste. And we're only here temporarily. Wouldn't it be better if the house was more comfortable for everyone?" More comfortable for everyone. But this was my home. I'd lived here for nearly half a century. Why should I adjust to the whims of people who were only staying a few months? But I stayed silent. I didn't want to fight with my son. I hoped that once the repairs were done, they'd leave, and I could restore the house to its former self. How naive I was. That fateful day started like any other. I had to go to the hospital for a routine checkup, a standard procedure recommended by my cardiologist. Jake offered to come with me, but I declined. At 68, I was still independent enough. "Don't worry about me," I said, kissing his cheek. "Go about your day. I'll be back after lunch." Lisa stood in the kitchen doorway sipping coffee from my favorite porcelain cup, the one Richard brought me from England. There was a strange smile on her face, almost predatory. "Good luck, Mama Eleanor," she said in her saccharine voice. "Hope everything goes well." Something in her tone made me pause at the door, but she'd already disappeared into the house. The checkup went fine, but took longer than expected. The doctor wanted to consult a colleague about one of the results. Nothing serious, just an extra precaution. By the time I left the hospital, it was 5 in the evening. As I approached the house, I smelled it. Smoke. Sharp, acrid smoke that made me cough even inside the car. My heart raced. Was it a fire? I slammed on the brakes in the driveway and leapt out. The smoke was coming from the backyard. I ran toward it, terrified that my house, my beautiful Victorian home with its hardwood floors and antique wallpaper, was burning. But it wasn't the house. In the center of the backyard, a large bonfire roared. Flames leapt high, greedily devouring what had been thrown into them, and what was burning stopped my heart. Paintings. My paintings were burning in the fire. I saw a fragment of a familiar frame, the gilded, carved 18th century frame that held the coal landscape, the canvas warped in the flames, the colors melting and blackening. Nearby, a Cézanne still life, bought in a small Provence gallery 25 years ago, was reduced to ash. "No!" I screamed, rushing toward the fire. And then I saw Lisa. She stood on the other side of the bonfire, holding another painting, my beloved self-portrait by a young Boston artist I'd discovered early in his career. She looked at me through the flames, her eyes glowing not with the fire's reflection, but with a cold, triumphant gleam. "Lisa!" I shouted, circling the fire. "What are you doing? Those are my paintings." "Clearing space," she replied calmly, almost indifferently. "This junk isn't needed." Junk. She called my collection junk as she tossed the self-portrait into the flames. I lunged toward the fire, trying to pull something, anything, out of the blaze. My hands reached for the burning Cézanne canvas, but the heat. Lisa, meanwhile, approached the fire with another stack of canvases. I recognized some of them with horror. They were from the basement. She'd been down there while I was gone, bringing them up. "Lisa, please," I begged. "You don't understand what you're doing. These paintings are worth millions, millions of dollars." She laughed, loudly, scornfully, cruelly. "Millions," she repeated, tossing a small Renoir study into the fire. "Mama Eleanor, do you seriously think these scribbles are worth anything? Who needs them? Who'd pay millions for them? There are collectors, museums, auctions," I started, but she cut me off. "Auctions!" She threw up her hands. "You're living in a fantasy world. This is just old paint on canvas. No one's going to pay real money for it." She walked over to the last pile of paintings, and I saw my most valuable piece among them, the Monet sketch, a preparatory drawing for his famous water lilies done in pencil and pastel on paper. I'd bought it for $200,000 20 years ago. It was worth at least $500,000 now. "Oh," I screamed, rushing toward her. "Don't you dare! Don't touch it!" but Lisa had already lifted the sketch above her head. In the firelight, it looked especially fragile and beautiful, the delicate pencil lines, the soft pastel strokes capturing the play of light on water. "This?" she asked mockingly. "This dirty little doodle." "God, Mama Eleanor, you really have terrible taste," and she threw the sketch into the fire. I fell to my knees, watching the Monet writhe in the flames. 200 years of art history turned to ash before my eyes. The genius who created that beauty, the touch of his hand on the paper, gone forever. "You killed it," I whispered. "You killed Monet." "Monet died 100 years ago," Lisa replied dryly. "I just burned a piece of paper." I looked up. Through the smoke and flames, I saw her face, calm, satisfied, almost blissful. She was relishing my pain. This wasn't an impulsive act or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate cruelty. "Why?" I asked. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I can," she said simply. "Because this house will be ours. Jake's the only heir, right? So sooner or later, everything here will belong to us, and I don't want to live in a museum of junk." "Will be ours." She spoke of my home, of my death, so casually, as if discussing dinner plans. I looked at Jake. He stood off to the side, but he didn't look surprised by her words. He knew. He'd known about her plans from the start. My own son. Flesh of my flesh, whom I carried in my womb, rocked in his cradle, taught to walk and talk, helped with homework, paid for college, supported through tough times. He had betrayed me for a woman who saw my life as an obstacle to her comfort. I rose slowly from my knees. In the fire, the last remnants of my collection burned. 40 years of passion, love for art, countless hours in galleries and museums, thousands of dollars spent not on luxury but on beauty. "How many?" I asked quietly. "What?" Lisa didn't understand. "How many paintings did you burn?" "All the ones I found, maybe 50 or more. I didn't count." "What's the difference?" 50 or more. My catalog listed 127 works. That meant about 70 might still be in the basement, if she hadn't gotten to them too. I walked toward the house. Lisa called after me. "Where are you going? There's still plenty of firewood." "Firewood." She called my paintings firewood. I went to the basement. My worst fears were confirmed. The racks were nearly empty. Empty frames littered the floor. Lisa had pulled out the canvases and discarded the frames. Some of the antique 17th and 18th century frames were broken. Only about 20 paintings remained, those tucked in the farthest corner behind the old washing machine. She must not have noticed them. 20 out of 127. I went back upstairs. The fire still blazed and Lisa was tossing the remaining frames into it. Jake sat on the porch steps, engrossed in his phone, a picture of domestic bliss. "I'm calling the police," I said. Lisa looked up at me. "For what? What are you going to tell them? That your daughter-in-law cleaned out the trash from your house?" This was destruction of property, intentional destruction of property worth over $3 million. Now Lisa laughed so loudly that neighbors peeked out. $3 million! Mama Eleanor, have you lost your mind? No one would pay $3 for those scribbles. "We'll see," I said and went inside to make the call. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, a young man and a middle-aged woman, listened to my story with polite skepticism. Meanwhile, Lisa turned on all her charm. "Officers, I'm so sorry about the misunderstanding," she said with sincere concern in her voice. "Mama Eleanor is going through a tough time. She's recently widowed, lives alone, and I think she's more attached to things than is healthy. I was just trying to help her declutter." "She burned paintings worth $3 million, I repeated. The officers exchanged a glance. The woman officer asked gently, Mrs. Grace, do you have any documentation to prove the value of these paintings? Of course. I have insurance appraisals, certificates of authenticity, purchase records. I brought out a folder with the documents. The insurance appraisal, dated last year, listed the collection's total value at $3.2 million. The woman officer's expression changed when she saw the figures. Mrs. Grace, this is a significant amount. You're saying your daughter-in-law destroyed paintings worth this much? She burned most of my collection, I confirmed. You can see the ashes. There are still fragments of the frames. The officers went to inspect the fire. Lisa paled when she saw how seriously they took the documents. It's a misunderstanding, she muttered. I didn't know. I thought... What did you think? The young officer asked. I thought they were just old paintings with no value. Who keeps million-dollar paintings in their house? Collectors, he replied dryly. Mrs. Grace, we'll file a report, but this case will be handed over to detectives. The damage is too significant for a simple dispute. When the police left, Lisa turned on Jake. You said she was exaggerating. You said those paintings were worthless. I didn't know, he mumbled. Mom never gave exact figures. That was a lie. I'd tried multiple times to explain the value of my collection, but they didn't listen. They didn't want to listen. That night, I lay in my bedroom, listening to them whisper in the guest room. Sometimes Lisa's voice rose to an angry hiss, but I couldn't make out the words. The next morning, they were overly polite. Jake apologized for the misunderstanding and offered to help me find a good lawyer. Lisa made breakfast, serving it with a guilty smile. But I saw fear in their eyes. For the first time since they moved in, they were afraid of me. They realized they hadn't just made a mistake. They'd committed a crime that could cost them everything. I said nothing. I just smiled and thanked them for breakfast because I had a plan. Detective Maria Rodriguez arrived the next day, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She listened carefully to my story, inspected the remains of the fire, and reviewed the documents. Mrs. Grace, this is a very serious matter, she said, closing her notebook. Intentional destruction of property worth over $3 million is a felony. Your daughter-in-law could face significant jail time. Detective, I looked her in the eye. I want justice to be served, but I also want my son to suffer no more than he already has. Are you saying he was complicit? He knew about her plans. I have their text messages. I showed her printouts of texts I'd found on Jake's phone the previous evening while he was in the shower. Messages they'd exchanged the day I went to the hospital. Lisa, she's gone. We can start. Jake, are you sure? Maybe we should wait. Lisa, Jake, we agreed on this. The longer we wait, the harder it'll be. Today's perfect. Jake, okay, but only the paintings in the basement. Don't touch the ones in the living room yet. Lisa, don't tell me what to do. I know what I'm doing. The detective read the messages and shook her head. This changes things. This is a conspiracy to destroy property. Your son could face charges too. I know, I said quietly, but I hope he'll realize his mistake and cooperate with the investigation. That same day, the detective questioned Lisa and Jake separately. Lisa kept up her act of innocence and misunderstanding, but when confronted with the evidence, she started throwing blame at everyone else. It was my fault for forcing them to live in a museum, Jake's fault for not explaining the painting's true value, the insurance company's fault for inflating the appraisals. Jake broke quickly. He admitted he knew about his wife's plans, but hoped she'd only burn a few paintings from the basement, not the entire collection. "Mom," he said to me that evening after the detective left, "I didn't want it to go this far. Lisa said we were just clearing some space." "Jake," I interrupted, "you conspired to destroy my property worth $3 million. You betrayed your mother's trust for your wife's convenience," he cried. My 35-year-old son sat in the kitchen and sobbed like a child. I didn't realize how serious it was. "Do you realize now?" He nodded. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know. Lisa says we should get a lawyer and fight. She thinks the court will side with us because we're family." "And what do you think?" Jake was silent for a long time, wiping his eyes. "I think we did something terrible, and I think we need to face the consequences." The next day, I called an appraiser. Mr. Edward Stone was one of the most respected art experts on the East Coast. A silver-haired gentleman with a monocle, he could authenticate a painting from a photograph. He arrived with an assistant and specialized equipment. Lisa greeted them with a sneer. "Another expert? How many people need to confirm that old paint is worthless?" Mr. Stone raised his monocle at her. "Madam, I've been appraising art for 40 years. I've seen paintings valued from $10 to $50 million. Believe me, I can tell the difference between old paint and genuine masterpieces." He examined the surviving paintings in the basement, reviewed my catalog, and photographed the remains of the burned frames. "Mrs. Grace," he said when he finished, "your collection was truly remarkable. I'm especially sorry about the loss of the Monet sketch. Works like that come onto the market once a decade." "What was the total value of what was destroyed?" I asked. Mr. Stone opened his tablet and showed me his calculations. Based on current market prices, the destroyed works were worth $3,200,000. The Monet sketch alone was worth about $600,000. The Cole landscape, $400,000. The Impressionist pieces. Lisa, who had been eavesdropping from the hallway, entered the room, her face ashen. "That's impossible," she whispered. "No one would pay that much for old paintings." "Madam," Mr. Stone raised his monocle again. "Last week, a smaller, less well-preserved Monet sketch sold at Sotheby's for $750,000. Paintings aren't just old paint. They're history, culture, humanity's heritage." Lisa fled the room. Moments later, I heard her yelling at Jake. "You said she was exaggerating. You said those paintings were just junk." "I didn't know," he shouted back. "How was I supposed to know?" Mr. Stone coughed delicately. "Mrs. Grace, I'm afraid your relatives don't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. Destroying artwork of this value isn't just material damage. It's a cultural tragedy. Some of these pieces were unique." "I understand, Mr. Stone. That's why I want justice." The next morning, a representative from the insurance company arrived. Mr. James Clark was the opposite of the refined Mr. Stone, a burly man with stern features and the demeanor of a bulldog. He'd worked in insurance for 20 years and had seen every kind of fraud. "Mrs. Grace," he said, reviewing the documents, "your insurance covers the destruction of the collection, but only in cases of accident or natural disaster. Intentional destruction by family members is a special case." "What does that mean?" "It means we'll pay you the insurance claim, but then we'll file a lawsuit against the responsible parties to recover the damages. Your daughter-in-law will be liable for the full amount, $3,200,000. Lisa, eavesdropping again, burst into the room. "That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money. No one can pay $3 million for burned paintings." Mr. Clark looked at her with the expression of someone dealing with an unreasonable child. "Madam, When you intentionally destroy someone else's property, you're obligated to compensate for its value. The size of that value isn't your concern. Your concern was not touching someone else's things. But I didn't know. Madam, ignorance doesn't absolve responsibility. If you'd burned someone's Rolls Royce by mistake, you'd still have to pay for a Rolls Royce, not a Honda. Lisa started crying. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw real tears, not theatrical sniffles. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you'll sell all your assets to cover the debt," Mr. Clark said flatly. "House, cars, savings, jewelry. If that's not enough, your wages will be garnished until the debt is fully paid." "For how long?" Mr. Clark shrugged. "Depends on your income. At an average salary, about 20 years. 20 years. Lisa was 32. She'd be paying off the debt until she was 52. But that's not fair," she sobbed. "I just wanted to clear space in the house." "Madam," Mr. Clark closed his folder, "you burned a collection of artwork worth over $3 million. Some of those pieces were created by world-renowned masters and had existed for over a century. Now they're gone forever because you wanted to clear space. You think 20 years of payments is too harsh a punishment?" Lisa didn't answer. She just cried. And I stood there watching her. And you know what? I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. The trial took place 3 months later. In that time, Lisa and Jake sold their house to afford top-tier lawyers. Their defense hinged on the claim that the destruction was unintentional, that Lisa didn't understand the painting's true value, that it was a family dispute, not a crime. But the evidence was irrefutable. Their text messages, witness testimonies, expert appraisals, and a neighbor's security camera footage that inadvertently captured part of our backyard. I sat in the courtroom, listening as Lisa's lawyer spun a tale about her difficult childhood and family misunderstandings, as if a tough childhood justified destroying cultural treasures. My lawyer, Mr. Robert Hughes, was concise and precise. "Your Honor, the defendant intentionally destroyed a collection of artwork worth $3,200,000. She had ample opportunity to learn the value of these works. The owner repeatedly tried to explain it to her, but the defendant chose not to listen because the information didn't suit her plans. This was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate crime." The judge, an older man with attentive eyes, listened to both sides. "Mrs. Wilson," he addressed Lisa, "you burned paintings knowing they didn't belong to you. You did so against the owner's wishes. You ignored her pleas to stop. How can you claim this was unintentional?" "Your Honor," Lisa stood, her face gaunt after months of stress, "I truly didn't understand how valuable those paintings were. If you'd known, what would you have done?" I wouldn't have touched them." "So the issue isn't that you didn't know you were destroying someone else's property. The issue is that you didn't think the property was valuable." "Yes, Your Honor," the judge nodded. "I see. So if these had been paintings worth $100 each, you would have thought it was fine to burn them?" Lisa realized the trap, but it was too late. "No, Your Honor, Mrs. Wilson, the value of an item doesn't determine whether you have the right to destroy it. You had no right to burn those paintings, even if they were worth $1 apiece, because they weren't yours." The verdict was harsh. 5 years probation with a mandate to pay full restitution. Jake received 2 years probation as an accomplice, but the real punishment was civil. The insurance company filed a lawsuit to recover the damages in full. All of Lisa and Jake's assets were seized by court order. Their house was sold at auction. Their cars, too. Their bank accounts were frozen. Lisa was allowed to keep only the bare essentials and an old car worth no more than $5,000. 70% of their income now went toward repaying the debt. At their salaries, full repayment would take 18 years. I received the full insurance payout, $3,200,000. The money hit my account the same day the civil judgment was issued. Lisa asked to meet. We met at a cafe downtown, neutral ground. She looked broken. Cheap clothes, grown-out roots, tired eyes. "Mama Eleanor," she began, "I know you have every right to hate me, but I want to apologize." "For what exactly?" I asked. "For burning your paintings, for hurting you, for destroying our family." "Lisa, you're apologizing because you got caught. If those paintings had really been worth $10 each, you wouldn't be sitting here." "That's not true." "It's exactly true. You regret the consequences, not the act. You still think you were right to want to clear space in my house?" Lisa cried. "What am I supposed to do? Jake and I are living in a one-bedroom apartment. I'm working as a cashier at a supermarket. We're barely getting by." "Work and pay off the debt. 18 years isn't that long. You're still young." "What about Jake? He's your son. Jake's a grown man. He made his choice. Now he lives with the consequences." "But we want kids." "Kids are expensive. Maybe you should have thought about that earlier." Lisa stood from the table. "You're a cruel woman, Mama Eleanor. Heartless." "Maybe," I agreed. "But I'm not the one who burned $3 million worth of someone else's paintings. After the trial, I sold the house on Maple Street. Too many bad memories. I bought an apartment downtown near the art museum and a few galleries. With the insurance money, I started rebuilding my collection. This time, more carefully, more systematically. I rented a vault in a specialized art storage facility, climate-controlled, secure, insured. Access only for me. In the first year, I acquired 20 paintings, not as big names as my old collection, but quality works by contemporary artists and a few 19th century pieces. Experts say that with proper storage and smart choices, my new collection will be worth as much as the old one in 10 years. Jake calls every week. He wants to rebuild our relationship. Says Lisa has changed, that they've learned their lesson. Invites me to dinner, suggests we meet. I politely decline. I have more important things to do. Recently, I became a trustee at the local art museum. I support young artists, organize exhibitions, give lectures on collecting. My story about the burned paintings has become a textbook example of why it's critical to insure and properly store artwork. Sometimes students ask if I regret being so harsh with my daughter-in-law and son. No, I don't. Not at all. They didn't just destroy my paintings. They destroyed 40 years of my life, my passion, my dream. They did it deliberately, with mockery, with contempt for what was sacred to me. The Monet sketch Lisa threw into the fire with a laugh was unique. There's no other like it, and there never will be. 150 years of art history turned to ash in 5 seconds, and they thought I should forgive that for the sake of family peace. I'm 70 now. I live alone in a bright apartment surrounded by beautiful paintings. I have friends in the art community, a purpose to dedicate the rest of my life to. Lisa works as a cashier and will be paying off the debt until she's 50. Jake works as a manager at a car dealership, handing over most of his salary each month to cover the same debt. Is that fair? I think so. They wanted to clear space in my house. Now they have plenty of space in their empty apartment, their empty wallet, their ruined lives. And I have my paintings. New, beautiful paintings that no one will ever throw into a fire. Because now I know who I can trust and who I can't. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes it can be hot, like the flames of the fire that consumed my dreams. I got justice, and it tasted better than any revenge. 5 years have passed. Lisa is still a cashier. Jake has changed jobs 3 times, but the debt remains. They divorced 2 years ago. The constant financial strain destroyed their marriage. Now each pays their share of the debt separately. Last week I bought a painting by a young artist from Brooklyn. An astonishing work, a modern interpretation of Monet's water lilies. It's as if he knew the story of my loss and sought to heal it. The painting hangs in my living room, bathed in morning sunlight. And every morning, as I look at it, I smile. Art is immortal. Stupidity always gets what it deserves. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you won't miss new exciting stories. See you tomorrow.